Marhaba, Ana Ismi, Kim Kardashian. There's only one person in this audience who knows what that's a reference to, and it was worth it just to say that. So I'm a writer, and I'm going to read something I've written. I don't have a fancy presentation, and I hope that's okay. I want to thank the Memphis Rocks crew for inviting me here and acknowledge what an important community it represents. And I'll try to do that via a long-winded way of introducing myself. If you're old enough to remember what climbing magazines are, you might know me as a writer. I spent 10 years working as an editor at one of those magazines. And over the last decade, I've been freelancing, writing shitty adventure clickbait for rags that nobody reads like National Geographic, and saving my best work for Evening Sends, which everyone knows is a prestigious online climbing journal and not a blog, okay? But some of you might recognize me from a film I was in earlier this year. It was part of the Real Rock Tour. And it was called Resistance Climbing, and it was a film about the climbing community in Palestine. And the only reason I wanted to mention that is because it's been really cool to see the synergy and connection between the members of the Memphis Rocks community and the Palestinian climbers in our film. Some of us got to meet each other at Mountain Film earlier this year, and the connection was immediately strong and amazing to see. I've heard it said that stories can be windows or mirrors, and when a story is a window, you get to look into a character's life and try to understand perspectives and ideas that might be totally foreign to you. But stories can also be mirrors, and that means you see yourself in the story, in those characters. I think for most climbers, our film was a window. It was a window into a group of people who are often dehumanized and demonized in the media. But for folks who have faced oppression and injustice in their lives, I think our film was maybe more of a mirror. And so I just want to acknowledge that profound connection many from the Memphis Rocks community share with the Palestinian people, and thank them for their solidarity, especially right now during these really difficult times. So thank you guys. All right, so now that we've got the Israel-Palestine conflict out of the way, on to more controversial subjects such as writing about rock climbing. I've titled my talk, How Writing Can Improve Your Climbing Experience, which I want to flag as potentially misleading. Somehow that title seems to promise tips and tricks for how to improve your writing or maximize your climbing experience, or write better Instagram captions so you can get more followers, or write a brilliant article about some far-flung climbing destination that you can sell to one of those magazines if they were still around. My talk isn't going to be about any of those things. In fact, my talk is about stopping ourselves from thinking in these opportunistic and materialistic terms and being open to do silly and meaningless things for their own sake. Things like climbing rocks. Today we live in an achievement culture, and what I mean by that is that we as individuals feel like it's our job and a sign of our worth and our value as human beings to be endlessly working on maximizing ourselves and our abilities. All of us are our own little personal projects that we're obsessed with. This explains our obsession with productivity, fitness, counting the number of books we read in a year, the number of words we write in a day, the number of followers we have on social media, the number of pitches we climb, how hard those routes were, how many hours of deep sleep we're getting, or mindfulness minutes we're logging on our smartphones, how we're positioning our authenticity and identity as people, as our personal brands, the trips we take, the dollars we make. In this context of this achievement-based culture, we've become pretty confused about what it means to lead a good, self-examined life and be good people. Climbers are famous at making this mistake. We think that if we can just reach that next hardest route or next grade, then we'll prove our worth. By getting to that next level, something fundamental about us will change. We can just send our project, then our identity will change for the better. We'll finally be able to call ourselves a 512 climber, a 513 climber, a 514 climber, whatever it is. Within all of these self-imposed goals is the promise of a new person, a new you. Things will be different if you can just crush yourself hard enough, trying to achieve that mastery. Only then do we believe that we can finally relax and be at peace, be satisfied, and finally just step back and relax and reflect. Unfortunately, it's not true that the harder you climb, the wiser you get. And I know that because I've interviewed lots of professional climbers. Besides, as we all know, reaching any summit only offers the briefest moment of contentment. Because as soon as you do stand on top of that goal, you don't stop. You just find a new goal to focus on, and you continue that cycle of crushing yourself because you think that the next reward is where the real payoff lies. This endless cycle of optimization has a place, of course, but has its downsides. It can drive us crazy and make us feel depressed, especially when we don't reach our goals, which we often don't, because then we have only ourselves to blame. In this culture of achievement, we're at risk of seeing ourselves as moral failures if we don't achieve our goals. So what's the answer to this? And in my view, it's doing things that you deeply and fundamentally understand to be absurd. Things that have no apparent meaning or value assigned to them, and then really challenging yourself to come up with an interesting reason for why you're doing it. I think rock climbing, which is both the silliest and greatest sport in the world, offers a really special opportunity to ask yourself that question of why. It's my opinion that taking the time to write about your climbing experience is the only way to answer that question too. I'm not talking about an Instagram caption where you just post the news of your latest send with the route name and the grade and a little green emoji check, and pay lip service to the journey and struggles you took to get there. That kind of writing is for other people. It's more often about flattering yourself or seeking praise and for being vulnerable or brave than it is an expression of trying to lead an examined life. This kind of writing I'm talking about isn't just for you. It doesn't have to be good by any standards. No one even has to read it. The only requirement, I think, is that it has to be hard. If the process sucks, then you're doing it right. Because you're really challenging yourself to find the most precise articulation of your idea and not settling for only getting halfway there. It means you're taking an honest stab at answering that question, why do you climb? One of the first times I ever asked myself that question was on an alpine climb in New Zealand. I was in college studying abroad and basically had no experience in the big mountains. And as some of you know, the Southern Alps are this incredible mountain landscape. They're called the training ground of the Himalaya, which I just learned from Conrad Anker is the way to pronounce that word. It's an amazing, there's amazing access to glaciated peaks of these like soaring ice-capped snow and snow-filled mountains. And having grown up in New York, I'd never seen mountains like this before, and I just knew I wanted to learn how to climb them. I forget how it happened exactly, but I found a local Kiwi dude named Danny, and he agreed to take me up my first big mountain. I couldn't wait. A whole new identity awaited me. I was going to be an alpinist. I didn't even own crampons, so I borrowed an old pair from him and a bunch of other gear as well. We spent a day hiking into the hut, and the next day woke up at 2 a.m., and began approaching into this alpine environment. We were scrambling through these steep jumbled blocks of melted out moraine, up sketchy loose wet rock. I was wearing like plastic boots and it was all just very uncomfortable and hard. We'd barely gotten to the real climbing, but I was already totally exhausted. As the terrain got steeper and more technical, we roped up and I was simul-ice climbing behind Danny up this immaculate face of snow and ice. It was all going so well until at one of our belays, half the fucking mountain fell off. A massive chunk of rock, bigger than a Walmart, but not as big as a super Walmart, came careening into the air and tumbling down into the valley. Seeing the earth move in this way just short-circuited my brain. I'd never seen anything like it. It just didn't understand what I was seeing. I felt was just shaking with the fear of God that I was about to die. Danny just said, "That's the big one," blending somewhere between 3 and 4 words together. "Carry on." Carry on, I wanted to go down. But I was along for the ride, and so I continued following Danny. And soon we actually made it to the summit. And on the way down, things started to fall apart for me. One of my borrowed crampons came off my boot and skated down into a crevasse, which Danny spent like 30 minutes trying to find while I just sat there like a child in timeout, listening to Daddy grumble and curse. After I lost his crampon, Danny's attitude toward me changed. And he seemed to be regretting bringing me, this total Gumby, up on the mountain. Once we were off the glacier and it was all relatively straightforward and safe to get back down to the hut, he just took off ahead of me, and soon he was gone. And I was just left there alone with my thoughts and my wobbly 19-year-old legs, which are so tired after ascending this huge-ass mountain. I felt bad about losing Danny's crampons and would have kicked myself if I had any strength left in my legs. And at some point during this solitary march back down the hut, sorry for the details, but I had to go to the bathroom. And I squatted down to do my business, but my tired widow legs couldn't support the squat position long enough, and I just crumpled into a pile of my own shit. And there I was, a freshly minted alpinist in this rarefied mountain environment of obscene beauty all around me, sitting in my own dookie. If you ever find yourself in this position, there's only one question you can ask yourself, which is, why? Why am I doing this? No, really, why do you climb? That's a question I've spent my writing career trying to answer, both for myself and on behalf of the other people I write about. I think it's important to iterate that there's no right answer to that question. But there is one arguably better way to try to answer it than others, and that's writing. I offer this idea up to you because a lot of people are scared to try writing. A lot of people only write because they feel like they have to create content, put out Instagrams, and play into that achievement culture game of getting ahead, being productive, getting paid. Another mistake people make is that they think that they need to be really strong climbers who do like big amazing trips to the Himalaya to write stories about climbing. And all of these notions are false. It's true that big adventures and type 2 fun is much easier to write about than the type 1 fun that most of us did today. And by type 1 fun, I mean like just going climbing with your friends out at the boulders in the gym, where nothing really, monumental happens. Someone makes a dumb joke and you stick the crimper on your project, but don't come any closer to sending. But I think trying to write about those experiences, those daily experiences, those are the ways that we spend all of our time. It's important to think about that and try to turn it into something valuable. And it's harder to escape that question of why. You can't escape it through a harrowing story of nearly dying in the mountains and then finding yourself sitting in a pile of your own shit. Most people think the purpose of writing is to entertain others or share ideas and knowledge, and of course it can be those things too. But I want to give everyone permission to just be open to writing about your climbing experiences, however mundane and ordinary you think them to be. Do it as a pointless, absurd challenge that you can do for its own sake. And if you engage with this consistently, if you write about climbing and try to find precise articulations about why you do it, you'll discover there are many reasons to climb. And best of all, you'll learn that those reasons change over time, which keeps climbing fresh, allows you to reinvent it for yourself, and come up with new reasons every day. I think there's immense value in that understanding, even if you can't measure it. Thank you.